Good evening, Prince of Peace family, and to the larger body of Christ, our friends and our families, our extended families, and all my friends, wherever you may be. I want to say thanks for tuning in tonight to Transparency Thursday, and I appreciate your coming on to share with us. I want to ask that you do a couple of things tonight because I want your opinions about a few things. I want to talk about standing in faith for what is right in society. This subject deals with faith and politics. It is not our first show about it or my first show about it, but I do want to keep it out in front of us because there are some bad things happening around the nation with regard to politics, which affects how we will live in this country, particularly as African Americans and more broadly as a minority in this country. And so I want to ask that you take down my email address, Pastor Shipman at popbap.org. That is Pastor Shipman at popbap.org. I'll make sure to check that this week and to make sure, or tonight, to make sure that I can respond to what your questions are. I want to ask if Sister Priscilla and Sister Siobhan are on watching, that they will keep me abreast of any comments. Let me find my phone and turn the ringer down so that they can call me without disrupting the conversation if they care to do so. So tonight we're going to be talking about standing in faith for what is right in society, faith and politics. In First Chronicles, chapters 1 through 9, verse number 44 of chapter 9 in particular, there's a section of scripture where we find a listing of families given in order to, first of all, justify the legitimacy of Israel's existence. We're not going to deal with that tonight, but I want you to know that there's a political bent to this. And secondly, to witness to the coming of Messiah, or to witness of the then coming Messiah and his bloodline connection to Israel and its nation and faith, and particularly through King David as royal lineage. Again, the first is purely a political reason, which tells Christians that God cares about the way that we are governed. I want to ask you something. Do you care about how you're being governed today? Do you care about voting? Do you care about politics? I said at the outset, I am not really a politician. I would probably be a poor representative of a politician. But all of us, or none of us, can escape the reality that we live in a world where politics matters. And it is not that politics is something secondary to what we are or who we are. It is endemic to us. All of us are politicians to the degree that we are all always figuring out how to deal with people, how to work with other people. Sure, it's sociology, but it is also politics as you navigate the strategies necessary to get people to where you need them, where you believe they should be, whether it is women's rights or minority rights in general. We are all politicians of some sort. Now, we are also politicians as it relates to how we get our jobs and things like that. Everything about life is very, very, very political. And so I want to say that at the outset for those of you, my brothers and sisters, who say, listen, I am concerned only with Christ. I am not a politician. Well, truth be told, Jesus dealt with the political. You remember somebody asked him about paying taxes one day, and he told Peter, go down to the river, find the fish, get the coin, take it out of his mouth, and pay taxes for me and you. You remember that he addressed Herod, so did John the Baptist for that much. And he dealt with Pilate as a political leader. So I want to ask you again, do you care about voting? Why should you care about voting since voting is a political thing? Let me say this. As a Christian, you should know that every prophet in the Old Testament spoke on God's behalf to the rulers, whether they were pharaohs, kings, or the kings of their day. But they spoke to these people about fairness and access for the poor, widows, and abandoned children. The prophets had that in mind. They spoke about morality, and they had a clear distinction about which political issues were moral issues and which were merely societal rights. In the New Testament, Jesus gave us at least one parable about a business owner who went out to, one day in the middle of the day to hire some people from the community, and the pushback that Jesus got for doing so as he tried to make their wages equal. At the end of that parable, after hearing somebody complain, Jesus said to them, friend, I don't do you any wrong. Did you not agree with me for a penny or for so much? In short, what I'm trying to say is that our participation in the social situation of our people and of our community is important in as much as we are ordained to bring light to the darkness. We are ordained to bring goodness to displace evil. And we are ordained to bring justice, to supplant unfairness of and in any kind of society. I know I'm moving a little bit fast, but my time will probably get away from me real quick, so I want to say some things and give you the chance to react and chat with me. To be sure, from a Christian perspective, we need to be clear that these are not merely social access judgments that we're talking about tonight, but they're moral judgments for a people who represent and serve a moral or a holy God. Involvement in this society is paramount to the growth of the Christian witness. It is paramount to the kingdom of God and for the salvation or welfare of the world and the communities in which we live. One of the issues that I think that we should be concerned with, that African Americans need to revisit, is our support for the Johnson Amendment, which was sponsored by Senator Lyndon Baines Johnson in 1954, and it was in response to the Brown versus Board of Education verdict. Johnson also became president later and did some good stuff after the assassination of President Kennedy. But let me tell you what the Johnson Amendment is. The Johnson Amendment is a provision in the United States Tax Code. It's been there since 1964, and it prohibits all 501c3 nonprofit organizations from endorsing or opposing political candidates. Section 501c3, it's very specific, organizations are the most common type of nonprofit organizations in the United States, ranging from charitable foundations to universities and to churches. Now, even though Donald Trump fought to repeal the Johnson Amendment, in my opinion, the amendment itself at its core restricts the involvement of churches which are essential to both voting and community political coalescing, and therefore represents a kind of federal government suppression, or suppression, that is, prohibition of nonprofit organizations from endorsing opposing political candidates. It's a form of suppression of the right to vote. Anybody who knows anything about African history in this country knows the prominent role that the church has played with respect to gathering people together, with respect to marches and protests and so on and so forth. And even now, although it seems that we are on the sidelines, which we're really not, even now it is important, and we may not be making as much progress as we need to make because our churches have been handcuffed. We've been handcuffed by the threat of having tax audits and so on and so forth, tax trouble if we endorse or if we talk politics the way it's come to be, talk politics from our pulpits. Churches, like their Old Testament counterparts, should be at least enabled to speak out against ungodly, public, legislative, and executive policies, if not against their sponsors. Not to possess the right to do so is indeed a form of voter suppression because it removes the voice of the Black and minority communities and stifles participation in the political process when Black people who esteem their religious leaders above all have no right to hear political propositions that affect them religiously, socially, and politically from their trusted primary leaders. In religious terms, the voice of the prophet has been muted. Let me stop there for just a second and see if there's anybody thinking anything that might help us. At this point, I want to talk more specifically about voter suppression, though. Voter suppression is a strategy used to influence the outcome of an election by discouraging or preventing specific groups of people from voting. Voter suppression is distinguished from political campaigning in that political campaigning attempts to change likely voting behavior by changing the opinions of the potential voters. There's a difference between trying to persuade somebody to your side and trying to keep somebody from voting because they are not on your side. That's the difference. The tactics of voter suppression that are happening in Georgia and that are represented by approximately 253 bills introduced in different state legislators across this country. These tactics range from minor changes to making voting less convenient to physically intimidating and even physically attacking prospective voters, which is indeed illegal. Voter suppression, my brothers and sisters, can be effective if a significant number of voters are intimidated or disenfranchised. That means feel that they have the right to vote taken away from them. Some of the ways that voter suppression takes place include lack of or malfunctioning machines at location sites. Also, another way is that voter ID laws might be passed or enforced to make people feel discouraged about voting. There are other informal roadblocks and felonies not being. There are other informal roadblocks like felons not being able to vote. All of these methods are voter suppression. Informal roadblocks also are another form of voter suppression. Things that would be considered informal roadblocks are changing voting locations, especially at the last minute. Being harassed by someone at the polls or simply not being able to leave your job in order to go to vote. That's voter suppression. There are things that can be dramatically affected, my brothers and sisters, by voter suppression or by non-voting. And I want you to listen. Here are a few of them. We are still in a COVID epidemic. The truth is that if we don't vote in 2 years, if COVID is still taking varying forms, relief could be affected in the future as far as helping people who lose their jobs or have to take off from their jobs. Protections can be mitigated or suppressed. Another thing that could be affected, you know that President Biden has recently reinstated the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act and other medical and mental health services could be stalled by a lack of funding that is necessary in order to block the benefits of the Affordable Care Act in the minority community for the public good. If we fail to vote on our congressmen and our senators, no telling what can possibly happen. Voter suppression is real and it will affect us. One other thing that I should mention, non-voting by itself is bad enough, much less voter suppression. Either one hurts us tremendously because it keeps us from benefiting from the things that should be ours by way of American inheritance. Here's some ways, excuse me, here's some of the ways that non-voting has an impact on communities where we live. Non-voting leaves us in the hands of other people to select, in many communities, our sheriffs and our chiefs of police. If you don't vote, you don't know who's heading your police department, and who's heading that department largely impacts how people who are in law enforcement treat you. Judges who adjudicate minor crimes, misdemeanors, could put you, or misdemeanors, could put you at a disadvantage when appearing in court. When you don't vote for the person who fills these positions, you're leaving yourself wide open for someone else to select administrators of your life in the social order that can cause problems for the most minute thing. Another thing that not voting does, it can, if we're not careful, prejudice juries against us. You may not be judged by a jury of your peers if you don't vote, because trial jurors are selected from the ranks of those people who vote. And I know lots of people try to get out of being on juries. But the truth be told is people like us can never get a fair shake unless there are enough of us to make up what the government calls a jury of our peers. That's an important thing for us. And so we need to vote. One of the things that hits us really hard, we don't pay attention to it because a lot of people just want to get the kids out of the house, but school funding and fund distribution is affected by who we vote for and whether we vote or not. Whether you live in Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Harrisburg, or Lancaster, it doesn't matter. Fayette County, Greene County, doesn't matter. Wherever you live, your school district and the success of it is largely dependent on how the state uses the federal monies that's sent down to it, or not only federal monies, but state uses tax dollars and federal money that's doled out for education or the education of our children. If we don't vote, the people who go in can look out primarily, and they have in our historic past, looked out primarily for their own and left us to struggle in schools without books, papers, pens, so on and so forth. Another thing that we want to mention is fair and adequate policing. It's affected by those who vote. What forces will tolerate is impacted. So when you talk about not voting or not caring about the suppression of the vote, you're really leaving yourself and your family's destiny in the hands of someone else. At least cast your vote and have something to say about the laws and the norms that are passed for our families. Another area that is a major concern, discrimination on jobs. Not just that we get the jobs, that's important, but that policies are in place to forbid us, or that do not forbid us from being able to get a job. However they create the equation, people are creative and they know how to make paradigms which keep us out. But not only are we kept out, but sometimes when we're in, we're kept from hiring. We're kept from promotions. How you vote dictates who's going to be passing laws and what their attitudes will be toward you and toward the people who look like you. And then finally, voting is important because there is serious discrimination in education that can be advanced. No loans for school or for higher education. The allowing of universities and higher educational institutions to price education at such a level so that people who are average income earners cannot pay their way to school, or their children will have a burden of debt that they cannot bear going throughout their whole lives. I want to ask you this. How do you feel about the loss of any of these things, the loss of control in any of these things? Why do you feel that way? Who are you expressing your feelings to? How are you expressing that? Are you getting out to vote? If you're a Christian, I want to ask you to join me in doing something. Let's be the real light. Let's not just quote that we are light. Let's be the real light of the world. Let's be the real salt of the earth. Let's use our voice and our opinion and let's voice our opinion with the vote. Our people will struggle, our children and our grandchildren will struggle if we never get it, if we never understand that it's important for us to do everything that we can to get to the polls, to register to vote, to get to the polls to vote, and to have an opinion about what's being said. And back when I was a kid, we used to say always, put your money where your mouth is. Get behind, I can't tell you who, but get behind some political candidate that represents the values that you represent, and don't just take it as though there is some, quote, American value that represents all of us. Our values in the last 20 to 25 years, have completely eroded. And as a Christian, we don't even see our values as being synonymous with American values in a lot of cases. And so whatever your position is, you may not be operating from a Christian disposition. You may have people who are operating from a Muslim or from some other religious disposition. That's fine. Just make sure that your voice is heard about the issues that are important to you. How to raise your children. The access that your children have to public institutions like libraries, to public recreation like pools and playgrounds, to enhance learning experiences. Voting makes a difference in every way. And then I should say this one thing: voting is so critical that it even affects what kind of food gets into our neighborhoods. You and I should be aware. Everything about us is determined by the vote. And don't be discouraged because you vote one time and someone else gets in that represents something else. That's fine. That's the way it is in this country. But don't stop, because you can make a change if you not only vote, but you talk about the change that you want to see, why you want to see it, and how it's going to be a blessing and benefit to your community. Voter suppression is an insidious attempt to marginalize, minimalize, and then to co-opt with little compensation the gifts and talents of African Americans and other minorities, because someone else believes that they have the right to be the dominant force and voice in what they call their America. Well, let's show them This is our America too. We built it, we bled for it, we died for it. We have a right to vote. And so hit me up at pastorshipman@popbap.org, or you can send me an email to my personal email at theship55@yahoo.com. That's THESHIP55@yahoo.com. Let me know what you're thinking and how you feel. For tonight, let me say thank you for tuning in and for listening to this old non-politician try to say something that will aid us in getting excited about the fact that we have control of our destiny as much as any human being can through the power of the vote. And man, if our grandparents could see us now and the apathy that we sometimes exhibit, man, they'd have all kinds of switches out for us. Let's get out and vote. Let's do what is right for us because it is right. And let's do what is right for others. God bless you. Heaven smile upon you. Thank you for watching Transparency Thursday tonight. I look forward to hearing from you with all of your comments. God bless. Bye-bye.